It's FoosTalk Live.
You talking to me?
Compelling and lively banter.
Are you going to talk to us?
Talking foosball.
Foosball was how I measured my value as a man. You took that away.
Players and fans, promoters and pros. Unedited and raw.
Talk.
Living in the moment.
We have a lot of important things to talk about.
All while practicing social distancing.
Cool. We'll talk. No big whoop.
Let's get this thing started. FoosTalk Live.
Yet again, coming to you live from the studios of Foosball Radio and inside Foos TV, it's the 34th episode of FoosTalk Live. Brought to you in part by 518 Prints, truly one of the best printers of promotional items, t-shirts, jackets, hoodies, and foosball apparel. Visit 518prints.com. FoosTalk also brought to you by Foosballers the Movie. Find out more about this Joe Hessler documentary at foosballersthemovie.com. Brought to you in part by Foosball Clubs USA, promoting foosball through school systems all over the country. Visit foosballclubsusa.com today and make a donation, please and thank you. Brought to you also by Foos by Tony and Foos by Brandon. Take lessons from a top pro today. And being brought to you by the USTSO, helping to usher in a new era of competitive foosball. Register now at usafoosball.com. Once again, live from the Foosball Radio studios and inside Foos TV, I'm Tom Robinson. 34th episode. It's hard to believe. If I calculate this correctly in my mind, that's 8 months, 9 months? I don't know. It's hard. I've lost track. Anyway, we are back together again, and lo and behold, with the velvety tones we know as the greatest play-by-play voice in foosball history from the great state of Colorado. Welcome, Jim Stevens.
Velvety tones. I like that. When I think of your voice, I think of the very same thing. In fact, more than mine.
Oh,
but thank you for the compliment, because I know you mean it, and I do appreciate it. And from a professional voice man such as yourself, that is a huge compliment. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome anytime. Hey, you're iconic. What can I tell you? When it comes to foosball, it's Jim Stevens. But
was that an insult? Did he just insult me?
No.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. 34 weeks, 34 shows.
Yeah.
That's about 8 months, isn't it? Maybe just a hair under 8 months.
Right.
But it's really remarkable. And now we're headed into winter. You know, things are starting to cool down, certainly here, and I'm sure in the foothills of the Adirondacks as well, where you live.
No doubt.
And so things are starting to cool off and starting to turn the corner as we look ahead towards 2021 and the possibility of the return of the Pro Tour.
You know what?
Next year.
You know what we really look forward to this time of the year in my neck of the woods. We don't we don't have to put our IPAs in the fridge anymore. We can just stick it out on the back porch.
You know, and we can do the same, although sometimes you get a frozen one or an exploded one.
Yeah, right.
But no, I get you. And that is one of the nice perks. You can just turn off all your electricity and just use your outdoor cooler, if you will.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you know, I think it's only fair, because we go on and on and on about this guy when he's not listening. And we talk trash about him all the time. But I think it's only fair that we let him kind of stand up for himself. I mean, he is, after all, our sturdy confidant and co-host. And he is the man, the myth, the winner of the 1990 World's Amateur Doubles Championship, and all-around foosball fanatic, if I could use that term. Of course, dwelling these days in the Windy City, even though he is from California originally. If I can ever get myself to the name, it is finally Mark El Toro Torres. Hello, Mark.
That's it? I mean,
Nice.
that was. Don't you have a broader introduction?
A broader
Why am I on
introduction.
this show? I don't get it. All right, fine. I'll take it.
covered
1990 Amateur Doubles. Yes.
I'd forgotten you had won that. I had forgotten that you had actually. That's right. You won in 1990. You played some pretty good players, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
too.
Right. Like 3 or 4 Hall of Famers. I wish the brackets existed, because every year I've added 50 more teams to the brackets. So it's probably like an 800 bracket tournament at this point, but legitimately it was like 350 teams. The 90s, man, amazing time.
Yeah.
I love myself, you guys. I love myself. Thanks for having me.
And for good reason, very good reason. And great to have you. An exciting night for foosball. We continue, Tom, sort of our walk through the history of foosball as we go back once again to the Dynamo era, 82 through 87, basically, when it was the primary table. There were Dynamo events before that, of course, but this was when it was the primary table in the United States, Mark Torres and Tom.
Right.
And so we're going to look back on that again tonight, looking at the goalies this week, and we're going to have one of those goalies on the show with us.
Yeah, I think
You know
that's exciting for sure. No, I was just going to say that I love hearing the war stories, especially from those days, because things were so much more intense with competitions and thousands of players coming out to tournaments with hundreds of tables. It sounds mythical.
It is the almost forgotten era, right? So TS is the golden era, and then you have this little intermediary era where people were transitioning, and there were still plenty of players. We call a second golden age now as we look back the 90s of Tornado.
Mm-hmm.
But this era was this was a table, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, it was a table designed and put out there by Johnny Lott, the Hall of Famer. And so it had some hybrid qualities. I never played it. I never played the table, but I've seen the table and I've seen video of it. There's a tremendous finesse game. And people, we talked about this last week, they didn't make the transition well from Dynamo to Tornado. Many people didn't make the transition well, but there was it ended up being the bridge to the next generation of foosball.
No.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if the lot had a lot to do with the Dynamo table. At that time, of course, he came with a striker table around 1986, which was predominantly in California, but also got some national attention and became sort of a secondary table here in the U.S. before Tornado began to ramp up again. But it was an era of transition, as Mark says. It was after this huge, humongous tour that you were talking about with thousands of players and lots of money, and then before the Tornado Tour, which Dave Currington sort of kicked off in the late 80s and into the 90s and it's still today.
Sure.
And so it is sort of a forgotten thing. That's a good point by Mark.
Yeah, no, I often wonder sometimes, too, if Tornado had never come to be, if that had never existed, what would have happened with tables like Dynamo?
There was always a market, man. There was always a market. So there would have been a table. I mean, there would have been a table, and people would have played. People are bananas, are obsessed and addicted to the sport. So someone would have answered the call.
Yeah, and with better organization and better design and better follow through, it could have been Striker, perhaps the table we were just referring to. But it had issues with how it was presented, and so. But as Mark said, there was sort of a vacuum. There would have been a vacuum,
sure,
because there was a market there. There were players who still wanted to play. Foosball was still fairly popular, and so it would have happened. But it's a good point. Let's go to an alternate universe and see how it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of stepping into alternate universes, what do you say we sample our IPA of the week?
What Jim and I like to do right about this time is to reveal our favorite IPA.
So, Jim, I know you've had a long drive today. You've been traversing the state of Colorado. What did you pick up along the way?
Well, while I was up in the Denver area, I went to a very large liquor store called Bubbles, of all things.
Nice.
I had a great selection, and I knew that Mike Green was coming on tonight out of the state of Florida, so I looked for some Florida IPAs, and I found Highlight out of Cigar City Brewing. It's actually the favorite IPA of none other than Tony Spredeman. So,
right.
So I just, in honor of Florida tonight, I'm cracking open a Highlight.
Highlight, excellent, very, very nice. Well, how does that taste?
Oh, it's yummy. It's delicious. Quite good. Yes,
yeah.
Good.
No, I think we sampled some of that myself. Maybe earlier this summer, around the time that Tony was giving me lessons. Around that time.
Gotcha.
Anyway, so this evening I am actually going local. A place called Druthers Brewery. It's actually based out of Albany, New York, but there's a location here in Saratoga Springs. Now they have a fundraising IPA. This is a great idea. You buy something called Toys for Toga IPA, and you automatically make a donation when you scan the barcode on the Toys for Toga IPA, and it automatically puts money into the fund to get kids who need toys for Christmas. So
I love that.
That's why I'm going there. So this is let's see. I have never tried it, so let's see what this is like. It is supposed to be very citrusy. That it is. Oh, very nice. Yeah, right here in Saratoga Springs, Toys for Toga, Druthers Brewery. Mark, what are you drinking?
Wow, I can't believe you remembered me. Usually I'm the forgotten third wheel and no one cares what I'm drinking. But I am drinking bubbly sparkling watermelon flavor.
Bubbly.
And it's 12 fluid ounces with 0 calories and absolutely no alcohol. I don't know where they make this stuff. It could be Mexico. I just don't know. And it tastes like socks. Okay.
Socks?
Yes.
Socks or stockings? What is it?
Okay, sure.
Oh my. Well, we all have something to toast.
Why do we bother?
I know.
I don't know.
It's
Every week, I don't know.
we don't want to make him feel like he's left out, Jim. It's
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
yeah, okay.
He is an insecure and very sensitive individual.
You got to
And,
respect. You got to respect.
Mark,
right?
that's a great choice
And
tonight,
broken,
Mark.
and a
Yes.
broken man, a broken shell of a man. You keep forgetting.
Oh, well, okay. Let's toast, guys, to the honor group of the week. This week it's actually a Facebook group. I don't know if they have a physical location, although I think they're out of Fayetteville, Arkansas. The Facebook group called the Foosball of the 70s. Now these guys, they focus on their Facebook page about those old tables, like Dynamo and TS and Garlando and Bonzini. And I noticed there's one of the guys in that group that actually rebuilds tables, which I thought was kind of cool.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah.
The 1970s, of course, the tournament soccer era, 75 through 81, this gigantic $1 million tour, but also simultaneous to that, you did have events on the early Tornado table, the early Dynamo tables, predominantly in the state of Texas and down south. And but there were these smaller tours that were taking place beneath this big, gigantic juggernaut that was the tournament soccer tour, the major leagues, and then maybe, if you want to, you call them minor leagues. Although certainly players who played on those two tours, the early Dynamo and early Tornado tours, do not think they were minor leagues. But
yeah.
But so that was also going on, and this group that you've mentioned tonight, cheers to you guys.
Yes.
Kind of focused on all of that, everyone's experience from those days, whatever the table was, wherever you lived.
I love their photographs. I mean, every day I see something a little different where they're working on an old table they must have dug out of who knows where, basement, garage, attic, and they're reviving these old tables, and it must take a lot of work and a lot of research to find the parts. That must be the tough part.
And there are a lot of bell-bottom pants on there as well, I noticed. It was the 70s. Everybody, Mark, you know this. Everybody wore bell-bottoms in the 70s.
Yeah.
Men, women, children, old folks, you name it.
I miss the pants. I miss the dancing.
pants.
I miss the recreational drugs. No, none of that. I don't miss the pants. The dancing is horrendous. Some of the music, like Captain and Tennille, okay. I mean, I don't know. The Carpenters, okay.
Man,
it's good stuff.
What about Donna Summer?
Can
What about the Bee Gees?
Oh, the Bee Gees.
Can
Now
I
you're
share
getting
just
serious.
a little bit of information on that regard? Because just recently on one of the Facebook pages I belong to, it's DJs. It's called I was a DJ when they actually played discs, and I don't mean CDs. That's the title of the group. So somebody posted one day, what is the last song you ever want to hear again because you played it thousands of times on the air?
Yeah.
It's the
What would that be for
song.
you, Tom?
Well, it was a toss-up. It was tough, I have to say. But I would say, for me, it was probably You're Having My Baby by Paul Anka.
Oh, yeah.
That is a stinker.
Have My Baby. Yeah, Paul Anka, a big star in the early 60s, had a comeback
horrible.
in the early to mid 70s, right, with that
Oh, yeah.
song. And it was huge. It was huge.
Oh.
They played it a lot.
And the other equal toss-up was I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. Hated it. I hated the opening piano piece. Now, just to let you know, back in the day when this was popular, I was going to college on Long Island, and my car, an old beat-up junker of a car, an old Chevy that had just an AM radio in the dashboard. And there was two radio stations I could get relatively clearly, WNBC and WABC. And they were both, playing music. And I would flip from one station to the other. That's all I could get. So one day, I was be cruising to school and listening to the radio, and on would come Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive. So I'd automatically flip to the other station. Guess what they're playing?
Yes, I Will Survive. It certainly survived. And that was a women's anthem, so we do have to tread carefully around this one. And it's been used as that many times. Mine probably was Afternoon Delight, if I had been a DJ in the 70s.
Starland Vocal Band. Come on.
I thought that was one of the top 10 worst songs of all time.
Bubblegum and Happiness and a coveted, well, shall we say, a covert way of mentioning we like to have sex in the afternoon. That was basically what that was.
Yeah, that's true. And Mark, I'm going to pivot back to those 1970s right now, because I think next week we're going to focus on the tournament soccer era a little bit, and we're angling to get a special guest from that era for next week. But we're going to talk about the tournament soccer era of the 70s coming up. And that was of course one of the most fascinating times in the history of American sports, really, when you break it down and when you really know what happened and how it went down. But it'll be fun to focus on that next year. Did you like that segue? How I went from Afternoon Delight right
he
to,
just pivoted, didn't he? He just pivoted away from
you. See me pivot?
I didn't understand the question though. If we could just go back and go back, rewind. Were you saying a song you never want to hear again, or a song you do want to hear on your deathbed?
Oh,
never, ever want to hear again.
No.
Never, ever want to hear it. Another example: Boston, More Than a Feeling. Hate.
I love that song. Oh my God.
But it was overplayed. The biggest selling debut album of all time, I think.
1976.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, did that get overplayed?
But
I can't even decide.
Mark, what's yours?
Mark, you got to have one.
Probably be. Have you ever heard of Zamfir and the Magic Pan Flute? I've never listened to any of that stuff either. I'm making it up. I saw it on TV. I have no idea.
Flute.
It rings a bell.
Yes.
It does ring
you
a
know
bell.
what it'd be?
The greatest
with
hits.
an X, right?
It'd be Tone Loc's Wild Thing, because my favorite radio station went off the air, and the radio. You tell me about this, Tom. They played the song on repeat.
Yes.
Over and over and over, because they had nothing. I guess they're off the air. The end of the radio station, and that song played on my favorite radio station, and I fell asleep to that stupid arse song, and
funny.
I want to strangle things. I want to kick puppies when I hear that song. No, I love dogs. I'm just kidding. Don't quote me on that.
Right.
Anyway, yes, Wild Things. Wild Thing. Hate it.
Oh. we can turn this an entire episode, but we won't. We won't do that. We're here to talk about foosball, okay? So
yes.
All right, and
70s foosball.
Let's talk about one of the greats of one of the all-time greats. In fact, let's get into that FoosTalk Live Flashback
with great moments in foosball history. This is a FoosTalk Live Flashback.
Horton trying to go to that short side with a square pull shot, gets it back after the block on the three. Johnny Horton fires it home. Johnny Horton running around the arena. He is the 2001 World Open Singles Champion. What a performance, and Johnny Horton going nuts.
Johnny Horton just loving the moment. Loving the moment. Great match by both players, but look at him just loving the moment.
Listen in next time for another great moment in foosball history. It's FoosTalk Live Flashback.
You know what I love about that cut? It has its own music bed, right? So you've got like the sound of the music bed, and it sounds like a Rocky theme or something, right?
That is Fanfare for the Common Man, Aaron Copland. Actually.
Oh, no kidding. Wow. Yep. No, I just find that really impressive that he had his own music and he was running around the,
his own music, yes.
That was wild, man. So Robert Mars I believe he was the number one player in the world at the time, and he had been. He was Robert Mars was going all around the country playing everything. Everybody expected Robbie to win that. He was the fastest guy, and winning everything. He was a master singles champion. People expected the pull shot to lose to the rollover. And Robbie himself refers to that match as good versus evil.
Oh,
and he sees himself as good.
Wow.
And he sees Johnny as evil. And guess who won? Satan won on that day. You got to thank Lucifer for giving Johnny Horton his big shot on that day. It was wild. That was one of Robbie's few chances to win open singles at the Worlds. And it was an incredible feat for Johnny to overcome. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, didn't he also, Mark, I know you were talking about this in the pre-show meeting, but he also had a shirt on that was memorable, didn't he?
Yeah.
It was clay, and that shirt was 70s, dude. If there's anything 70s in foosball, it was that shirt. It was like a disco ball that was unraveled and made into like a blouse. It was a disco ball blouse, is what it was.
Wow.
It was blinding. It was
No
crazy.
It was. And as soon as he won that, he leaps in the air. He ran one way, ran around, jumped onto a table, put his hands up into the air. The crowd surrounded him. It was quite a moment.
Man.
Quite a spectacle. It was a pure, unadulterated Johnny Horton. No question about it.
When does that ever happen at a tournament? I mean, that's something that's what? That was
Only Murray,
2001.
only Murray, and only Johnny. Those are the only two people you see jumping on tables.
Wow.
Only people you see jumping on tables. And here's the thing about Johnny Horton: as the duplicity with his greatness on the table and all the weirdness off the table, he's one of those guys that had people chasing him down to watch his matches, following him around. He was the villain, and at the same time, he was the most exciting thing going on in the tournament room. And I clearly remember him playing open doubles matches on table 17, and there's a pit match on table 1 between two masters ranked way higher than him. And Johnny's playing doubles with like Steve Biney as his goalie versus two novices, and everybody is crowding around the table Johnny Horton is playing. And it's because he's saying things and he's talking and he's doing his wacky deal, and everybody just flocks around him. So that kind of energy, that kind of vibrant enthusiasm and love for the game. And, you know, I'll just say this last thing before we got to move on. I talked to Johnny Horton on Monday, and the guy's brilliant.
Yeah.
I talked to him for 20 minutes. He's brilliant. He will tell you that the guys that he played said it brought the best out in them. So he felt like he was driving the best out of his opposition. Jim, you're talking. Go ahead. You can chime in.
No, I'm agreeing. And, I think when we did our list earlier this year, the most entertaining players, greatest showman, whatever, he was at the top of at least one of our lists as the greatest showman that the sport has ever produced, and for a variety of reasons. And you mentioned those crowds that would hover around table 17. Those are the same people that would go to Talladega Raceway to see a car crash, right? I mean, that's why they're there. They don't know what they're going to see, and oftentimes they got their money's worth, no doubt about it, because there were issues, there were moments in ballrooms and in hotel rooms and everywhere else that are memorable and are part of what make Johnny Horton, and in many ways, a Hall of Famer, great player, multiple world championships, but a guy that probably could have won a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. Now, if someone were to take that same vibe, that same kind of chemistry, that same kind of behavior to the World Cup these days, let's say to Murcia, Spain in 2019, how would that have been received? You got to wonder.
You know, there's actually go ahead, Jim.
No, you go, Mark.
Okay, there's a thriving conversation right now on the Inside Foos page, TV page, and I started this conversation, and I think I spoke to this last week. I don't want to be too redundant, but there's something. I intentionally talk about trash talk to be incendiary. That's not what I really mean. What I really mean is, how do we liven up the engagement? And if you do a little history, it seems people are saying that a couple guys in the 70s decided our sport should be like golf. Our sport should not be like golf. Our sport should allow players to engage each other. And then I just heard something horrible. Someone was watching the 2012 World Championship final between Frederic and someone else on another international table. And he said that after Frederic scored a point, you could hear the individual golf clapping, like one or two people clapping silently. And somehow the environment and ecosystem and culture of our sport is this disquieted church-like atmosphere. I would say that our rules are not supportive of that kind of engagement, and we got to find mechanisms to get the crowd, so the crowd isn't terrified of the players looking up at them, because that's the concern. If you're in the crowd, you're concerned if you're too loud, the player's going to look up at you and ask you to be quiet, which is ridiculous. It's really silly. Anyway,
you're right. You're right. It needs to be more of a show, no question about it. You mentioned Europe. In fact, in Europe, oftentimes you do get better crowds, and one of the reasons, and I honestly believe this, and especially towards the end of the weekend, is the crowd is made up of foosball players. These foosball players have been playing foosball from anywhere from 2 days to 5 days previously, all day long, one match after another. They're going down and they're sitting in the bleachers to watch foosball, but they've got to conserve their energy if they want to continue to play. You know, I think as we move into the future and as we consider other options as far as formats go, the Swiss system versus the double elimination type format, you're going to get not only is the sport going to be promoted as more of a show, but you're also going to get players in the audience who maybe aren't quite as burnt out and are ready to respond.
Sure.
But also, it's how you package it, it's how you sell it, it's how you present it that really will organically, you would hope, create these sorts of reactions. And I think that's what you're looking for. You don't want to force it. You don't want to hold up signs that say applause.
Right.
You want it to be organic. You want it to be natural, but you need to create an environment that produces that.
Yeah, it's
and these are topics for debate. Maybe we should debate some of these at some point. What do you think?
We should.
Yeah,
we should
I think this is a huge one. This
Mm-hmm.
is a big giant gorilla in the room type argument. This idea, and all you have to do is take a look at the World Poker Tour and how people gather around to watch people play poker.
Yeah,
really.
Well, even
darts.
any sport. Any sport, but
darts.
so if you go to any very, very highly watched sport, the crowd is not all competitors like it is in foosball. The crowd is made up of maybe some of these people know the game casually, like the game, enjoy the engagement of it, but they're not competitors. To your point, Jim, a lot of our audience are foosball competitors, and you get another weirdness with that. So if Dave Gummerson is playing Tracy McMillan, who do you root for? Like, I mean, what do you do? If Tracy's playing someone and Gummerson is with a partner with the other person, then you have competitors who are in the audience that are reluctant to applaud or do anything because these are their friends. And who do we root against? It is a weirdness of foosball that's unique. How do we get more people that are not competitors in the stands? That needs to be figured out.
Yeah.
Get people interested in foosball. Go ahead.
You're right. No question about it. But I could also remember a few select moments over the last 10 years where there have been matches and situations and maybe all other play was shut down and like they have at the World Championships and everybody's crowded around. And there are moments, there are great matches and there are reactions that, again, are organic. But for the most part, yes, we've got to figure out a way to overcome that. And I'm fairly confident that we will. Yeah.
Make it acceptable, plain and simple. It's like, hey, have some fun, man. This is a great sport. Let's get into it and let's enjoy it. I think it's high time.
Yeah.
Well,
it might be high time for Mark and I to debate tonight,
yeah,
or rather to go over our top
fives. You guys want to go head to head?
We'll debate another moment.
I can tell. So let's do this. It's the top 5 Dynamo goalies of all time.
I'm going to crush you, Mark.
Yeah.
Crushing you.
Listen, you guys, I'm going to throw you a massive curveball right now.
Okay.
A massive curveball. Here's the curveball. Top 5 Dynamo goalies. I'm going to fully admit that last week, top 5 forwards was even a weakness of mine because I picked my favorite guys to be the top 5. This week, our guest is probably on this list, and I'm bringing him in as my ringer.
Oh, hold on.
I'm going to bow out and let my guy, Mike Green, represent me.
Is that legal, Tom? Is he allowed to do this?
I've got to check give me 2 seconds to check the rule book. I mean, I don't know if the rule book has gone that far yet.
Call Tom York. Give Tom York a call.
Let's just start this and let's get it over with, okay?
Time once again for the FoosTalk Live Top 5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here's Jim Stevens and Mark Torres.
Mike Green.
There needs to be an investigation. This is not. I beat Mark 19 weeks in a row, and then he brings in a ringer, and I don't have a chance against this guy. He was dead right in the middle of it.
Yeah,
and experienced it at the highest level. I was kind of around, and I knew Mike back then, of course. But he's going to kill me. I'm going to get killed tonight.
Good. Let's make it even easier. In respect to our guest, I'm going to propose that Jim go first and Mike goes second. Mike, are you even there?
Are you serious? You want Jim to go first?
I want Jim to go first. Yes.
All right.
I want Jim going first.
All right, Jim.
Mike, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thanks for joining us, Mike Green. Everybody, the outstanding player out of the state of Florida, 1985 World Doubles Champion with the aforementioned Johnny Horton, and great to have you on the show tonight. But it is not fair that you're coming on and pinch hitting, so to speak, Wally pipping me. Go look it up, folks.
What is that?
Coming in tonight and taking over for Mark Torres, and but I look forward to the challenge. But it's going to be a daunting one for me, Mike. Looking forward to top 5 Dynamo goalies.
FoosTalk Live Top 5. Number.
Yeah, I guess I'm leading off tonight, Mike, and we'd love to hear from you here in a minute. But I guess for me, number 5, of that era, and I'm gonna go somewhere that maybe a lot of people didn't predict, but I'm gonna say the number 5 Dynamo goalie for me was Tina Roton. Tina won the 1985 National Open Doubles Championship with Greg G. Perry. I'm sure you remember that, Mike. This was also the very best ladies player of that era, of 82 through 87, the Dynamo era, when Dynamo was the predominant table. Tina was a great forward. She was a great goalie, great singles player, great player, wonderful person, bless her. And but as far as being a goalie, the only woman to ever win an open doubles title at a major championship, Tina Roton with Greg G. Perry in 1985. For me, I've got Tina at number 5, Mike.
Well, I think that's incredible because I struggled and struggled. I wanted to put her on there because she actually beat me and Horton in that tournament where they won. And yeah, Tina is an incredible player. And in fact, a lot of the guys that I talked to said the same thing. But my number 5 would be Ricky Benitez. He won almost every tournament in 85 and half the tournaments in 86, and actually won the Striker Reunion Tour. Him and Larry Chesborough were a really hard team to beat. So that'd be my number 5.
Okay. No, I by the way, Mike, we didn't get a chance to really welcome you and say hello to you. You're down in the state of Florida, and it's really a pleasure to have you on tonight.
Oh, it's an honor. I listen every week. Love it. I love the show, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, Mike, you're ready spanking Jim's behind red. Go ahead.
Tina's a great choice. Tina was incredible. Yeah.
I think I've got the early lead here. I'm pretty sure.
Shall we proceed? Shall we go to number 4?
Do it, Tom. Do it.
FoosTalk Live Top 5. Number 4.
Yeah, I went Ricky Benitez at number 4, and he played with Larry Chesborough. What a great team that was. But they never won a world championship. They did win the World Series, the Dynamo Open Doubles title in 1986, and had several others. They won the U.S. Open in 1985, had a few other top 3 finishes. Won an event on Striker, of course. But Benitez and Chesborough, really, as great a team as they were, and for that period, really in 1986 in particular. Larry Chesborough may have been the best player in the world in 1986 on that tour. That's how good he was. And that team of Chesborough and Benitez was dynamite. But they never really won the big one. And that's why I have him only at number 4. This was a great player, part of a great team, but did not win that world title. And not that you have to win a world title necessarily to be on this list, because I've got someone else on here that isn't a world champion. But for me, I've got Ricky at number 4.
Okay, well, for me, this was kind of weird because I listened to what people told me. So I actually put myself at number 4. And, I basically was one ball away from playing for the winners bracket in 84, 85, and 86, and had some other wins with Chad Hansen. Actually, I probably played less with Horton than anybody, but nobody realizes that. But I don't want to go on about myself, so I'll just say I'll put myself at number 4.
Wow, Mike, I think that's pretty humble of you to put yourself at 4. I was thinking maybe you'd be further up the list.
Well, I was going to use the Mark Torres structure and just put myself at number 1. But anyway. I was a little more humble, I guess.
More humble than Mark Torres? Is that even possible?
It's funny because I put myself as the number 4 Dynamo best goalie of all time too. So we got some things in common, Mike.
Hey, we still got number 1 to go. You don't know yet, Mark. You could be there.
Oh, you never know.
Let's do it, Tom.
Let's find out.
FoosTalk Live Top 5. Number 3.
My number 3 out of the state of Colorado here is Kevin Everson. Mark Rudnicki, Kevin Everson, such a strong team during that era. In fact, I remember 1982 U.S. Open, if I'm going to be a little self-serving here, 1982 U.S. Open in Los Angeles. My partner and I, Clint Coyne, faced Mark Rudnicki and Kevin Everson in the semifinals of the winners bracket of Open Doubles and had a great 5-game match against them. Everson was a great defensive player, except against push kicks. And we ended up winning that. But Kevin Everson, Mark Rudnicki, and I'm sure you'd agree, a team that only really had one major victory, and that was the Super Doubles Championship in 1985 on Dynamo, where they won Open Doubles and then went on to win the Super Doubles title as well. But this was a great team out of Colorado, coming out of an area, of course, that had produced so many great players, so competitive an environment in the Rocky Mountain State. But for me, it was Everson and Rudnicki, solid team, so consistent, always top fives in any event they went to, several top threes. And then, of course, that $20,000 Super Doubles win in 1985. I've got Kevin Everson as my number 3.
Yeah, I love Kevin Everson's game. And he's a guy that, win or lose, he looked at you, intimidated you so much you weren't sure what he was going to do. But great guy, great game. But mine would be Bob Maloney. Bob has just always been a hero of mine, and just watching him play, just consistent, and just nothing bothered the guy. And, not only could he win at goalie, obviously he could jump on, play front, and win a world title. But, yeah, I'm going with Bob Maloney on that one, just from my respect for his game and how good I knew he was.
Yeah, Maloney definitely a guy that deserves to be on this list. And Maloney didn't win a world championship on Dynamo, had a lot of really good finishes, did eventually win the world championship on in open doubles on Tornado, I believe 1987.
Well, they actually won the 86 Worlds playing on Dynamo, him and Todd.
87.
87. Yeah, on Dynamo, right.
Yeah. So,
okay. Hey, let me chime in on Kevin Everson, man. My first Worlds was 90. Of course, you guys know that because I dominated the amateur doubles division. However, Mark Rudnicki and Kevin Everson played Lafredo and Trevino in the finals of that open doubles event. And Mark Rudnicki, Mark Rudnicki was like a bull. Like you could see the steam coming off his head, man. He had his head on, and Kevin Everson was his companion beast. And these guys were monsters. But Todd back then was fasting. He was not eating for 3 days, and he attacked these dudes. And it was unfortunate for them because they're from Colorado. Rudnicki's from Colorado, and Todd and Rudnicki have a thing, right? So Todd's really comfortable against his hometown. And Todd rolled them over. He rolled them over, but they were so impressive. So like a year or two later, I have a chance to play 3,500 limited with Kevin Everson, and I was too intimidated. I was a hot, novice player, and I was like, no. I had a chance. I'm like, no, man. He was too intimidating for me to play forward for as a novice. He had just been in the open doubles final, like my first World. So that dude's a monster. I love that guy's game, and I just thought I'd chime in that I seen him play, and he was a beast. Even on Tornado, he was great.
Yeah, one last note on Bob Maloney as well. I misspoke. It was on Dynamo that he'd won, because that same year, Lafredo also paired with Steve Murray, who would never appear on any Dynamo list, of course, but was a great Tornado player. But yeah, Dynamo was Maloney winning that year, and maybe just an oversight on my part not putting him in my top 5.
If we ever had a top 5 brunettes on Dynamo, Steve Murray would be my number 5. Just call it right now.
He's appeared on every one of your lists so far this season. You need to stay consistent. All right, Tom, take control of this show.
Anytime you're ready. Anytime you're ready.
FoosTalk Live Top 5. Number 2.
Yeah, I've got a guy out of Florida named Mike Green as my number 2. Anybody who can put up with Johnny Horton, and again, I know you didn't play with Horton all the time. It wasn't you guys did play in some huge events, and of course won that world championship, which I was there to watch. I sat up there in the bleachers, watched you guys win that, my first world championship at the reunion Hyatt, I think it was, there in Dallas. But this guy, just such a fighter, so good at getting the most out of his partner. A guy that, of course, Horton and Green, and maybe there could have been a couple extra championships in there. Who knows? Horton was up and down so much. But we're going to talk more about this as the show goes on, about Mike Green and his experiences playing with Johnny Horton. But for me, Mike Green, I was always so impressed with how gritty he was, how smart he was, how good defensively he was. He could get it done on the offensive side, gave his partner lots of opportunities, and was just such a good teammate as well. And so for me, I got you, buddy. Mike Green at number 2.
Wow, that's awesome, man. That's an honor. Actually, it's kind of wild because Dave Gumbison kind of said the same thing to me, which, I mean, honestly, it floored me. You never know what people's real opinion of you is, especially when when you played with Johnny, because you were kind of in a bad situation to start with, just because the guy playing front for you. But I appreciate that, Jim. But mine, I'm still going the old guys. I'm going with Mike Bowers. He won 83 Worlds. He won with super doubles with Bob Gibson, who Bob Gibson is an animal. I love Bob's game. But, I came in the tail end of TS, and I just saw, him play, and just the way he just handled himself. And, people don't realize that Dynamo was kind of like a two-parter. Like 82, 83 was like a pro build, more like a TS table.
Yeah.
And then kind of like 83 through 87, or whatever it is, 84 through 87, started getting the new faces, the new winners, and the old guys started fading out. But Bowers definitely deserves it. He played incredible on every table he's ever played on, and that's my number 2.
Yeah, no, that's a good choice. I had a chance to play Mike in that same 82 U.S. Open, and I had been drilling everyone with a push kick all weekend long. And then I came up against Greg Perry and Mike Bowers, and I went like 2 for 31, I think, which means my 5 was working pretty well, but I could not get the ball through him. And of course, I love that long push kick, and he was not going to give it to me. And so, no, greatest of respect. The only reason Mike isn't on my list is because he just didn't play enough Dynamo, didn't play enough events on the Dynamo table really to have I think been a consistent, successful performer on that tour. So there you go, all yours, Tom.
FoosTalk Live proudly presents the top 5. Number 1.
Oh, I love that. I just love that. Gives me chills. That gives me chills. Goosebumps. Again, as we've discussed, that was when I became a pro player. I was immersed in it, and a lot of it, I talked to the guys in the pre-show meeting about this, Mike, and I was a player, during that era, 82 through 87, I had my head down, I had my hat on, I was looking down at the table, I was playing foosball. So I wasn't as aware of what was going on around me as I became later, of course, as a reporter. But this is an era, and again, this guy, my number 1, is a guy that I played on the way to his and his team's first ever Open title. That would be the 1982 U.S. Open in Los Angeles, where I happened to finish third in open doubles. These guys finished first, and that was Tony Bacon and Don Chalafu. Chalafu, again, a guy that was just a great partner. Toughest guy in the room, a guy that was just a rock back there. Good shooting goalie, good defensive goalie against everything but a push kick, and was obviously a very successful player. He and Tony won that 82 U.S. Open in L.A. They won the World Championship in 82, again in 83, second in 85, and in 86, or rather 87 as well. Just a tremendous team, a tremendous part of a great team. And I don't know if you've got him at number 1 as well, but a guy that we still talk to, a guy that was a guest on this show earlier this year, a guy that we see out on tour, and we love seeing him each and every time. What a credit to the sport Don Chalafu has been for now a good 40 plus years. But for me, based on success, based on results, based on just an incredible stretch there in open doubles, I've got Don Chalafu at number 1.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have Don at number 1. There is no option there. It's kind of funny that over the years I heard people say things about Don. This may not have been that strong, or that may not have been that strong. But to me, that just means they don't understand doubles. I mean, I told Mark one of the things I'd like to see is, you guys do something on would Terry Moore have been Terry Moore without Diaz, or Diaz without Terry Moore?
Yeah.
Even would, Frederico have been Frederico as good as he is without Todd's knowledge
Absolutely
of the game?
not. Yeah.
And, so, yeah, anybody that says something anyway negative about Don, and nobody ever does, but Don's my hero, because not only does he play the game so well, when we played him, he goes, bro, no matter what happens, man, we're hanging out together, we're friends. And I saw him a little later that night after beating him, and I'm 22, and I'm like, feeling like, what? And Don goes, put your head up, champ, and so,
yeah.
No, I love Don, and he, he's just a guy, they call him dad for a reason because he's always teaching. He's always doing what he does. And Don is absolutely number one in my book.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully he's listening tonight because you were number one on both our lists tonight there, Donnie.
Well, guys, that was just anticlimactic there. You agreed at the end. I thought there was supposed to be a battle.
Yeah, overall, I'm thinking Green got me. I think he got me with Maloney. I think that pretty much solidified his win tonight. So after 19 weeks in a row of coming out on top, I'm finally finishing second tonight. And great job, Mike. We kind of threw you into the deep end of the pool a little bit tonight, but it's great talking foosball with these guys, Tom, that were there right in the middle of it, playing in the biggest matches, experiencing what that was. And we're going to talk more with Mike tonight about his career and about playing with Horton and everything else, especially once Mark rejoins us. Mike, last week.
I just want to know, Mike, may I share this win with you? Do you mind if I share this win with you tonight?
Oh, I would love you to.
Man.
Pourquoi?
Thank you.
How do we find a way to into the rule books for Mark? You stepped away and let Mike do your job tonight. So
it's pretty clear, right? Because Mike doesn't win without me if I don't invite him to do this.
Oh, I see. Well,
it's a forward goalie thing,
So
I can see this is week one of about a 5-week losing streak for me.
Blown away the rules. Now, anytime Jim in the future could also bring in a ringer if that's something he desired to do. Correct.
Too proud. He's too proud to bring in a ringer.
I'm bringing one in next week, buddy. Next week, I'm bringing one in.
So all of a sudden we've got
Mike. I know you're a big listener to the show, and you listened last week when we had the top forwards of the Dynamo era. Do you by chance have a top 5 best forwards of that era at your disposal?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think I got to go with Mark Torres.
Yeah, see, there it is.
He pretty much pegged it.
You're just a winner. Mike, you're just a winner, bro. You're just a winner, okay?
Well, of course, that's part of me being on the show tonight. I had to say that.
You had to say that. Okay. All right.
Great.
Actually, I'll make mine kind of quick. I picked Todd.
Did we lose Mike?
I'm sorry. No, I'm getting phone calls. I apologize.
Mm-hmm. From Don Chalafu, probably.
Yeah, right.
Okay. It actually is Chalafu, no, but
yeah. All right, start with number 5. Let's count you down. Let's start at number 5.
Todd, and that's because he kind of bounced back and forth between Dynamo and Tornado. My number 4 was Bob Gibson. I think he was probably, to my opinion, one of the best players I've ever seen. Larry Chesborough and Johnny Horton, and then of course Tony Bacon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my top 5, and I could definitely mix and match a couple of those one way or the other. But
I think you won last week too. I think you've officially won 2 of them. I think that list wins last week also. Got us on Gibson. Gibson, of course, what a talented player he was. He was the next big star to come out of that Arapahoe program in Denver, and then the tour crashed in '81. And he continued on for a little while on Dynamo and had some success, but if the tour hadn't crashed, I think Bob Gibson would have had a heck of a career, Hall of Fame career, no doubt about it. So, all right, Mike, you're 2-0 now, and I only won 18 in a row because we're giving you last week's win as well.
Well, and I'll say one more thing about it though, like Chesborough. Now, you don't ever hear Todd speak up too much about who shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, and I made a comment on Facebook about Chesborough should. He did win pro doubles, world championships and TS, so he's done a lot, and all of a sudden, Todd, who I heard from in 2 years, pops in and says, no doubt, 100% he has my vote. One of the best players ever. That's pretty strong. So, Chesborough's in there too.
Argument. I keep hearing 2 sides of this. One is Todd saying, and I think people who played in the era saw Larry win everything except for the Worlds for like 2 years. This is all anecdotal, secondhand stuff.
That's accurate.
He allegedly won everything. So he was incredibly dominant during this time. What is the argument? And I know, Jim, you're in a tough spot because you're actually on the Hall of Fame committee. Why wouldn't, if you're winning all these majors during the Dynamo era, why wouldn't you be in the Hall of Fame, especially with a guy like Todd saying, what is the deal? Talk to me about that.
Well, Todd's assessment of other players hasn't always been the strongest, but looking at the record, I have it in front of me. In 79 and 80 on the tournament soccer tour, Larry was a dominant pro level player. And that's the next step down. Had a lot of success as a pro in pro doubles, pro singles. pro mixed doubles even. On Dynamo, again, not winning the world championship. If he wins one world championship, he gets consideration. Now, has every player in the Hall of Fame won a world championship? Pretty close. If there may be one or two that haven't, and that's the thing. You kind of almost have to win a world championship title in open doubles or open singles. In the case of Don Swan, his only world championship was in mixed doubles, but yet it was an open title. And it was just a combination, I guess, of everything else he did. So if you're going to put Larry in that kind of ballpark of a Don Swan or maybe one or two other players that are in the Hall of Fame who didn't win a world championship, certainly he deserves consideration. But who would you have put him in ahead of if you look back at the top players who have been voted in over the last 10 or 15 years? And I'm not sure you would have found someone to vote him in over. Again, the world championship or lack of one is what hurts Larry in this case.
Okay, interesting. Sounds silly, but we'll see. I'm kidding, man. I don't know. I don't know any better.
Well, Mike,
Tom,
yeah. So
Tom, we're turning it over to you for the opening of the official interview part of this.
The official interview, yes. So, Mike, I think that first of all, we're honored that you would decide to join us and take a chance on these two clowns and sit in the hot seat tonight. But thank you so much for being here. But first of all, traditionally speaking, we got to ask, when was the first time you actually saw a foosball table, and when was the first time you actually attempted to play the game?
I knew you were going to ask that. It's funny. I was actually probably like in the 5th grade, maybe.
Okay.
And I'm walking by this thing because, I'm from Florida. So we were out by the beach. My mom's doing the window shopping. And I hear this noise, and I look in, and I see these guys playing this game. And I walk over there, and I was just mesmerized.
Right.
I mean, just totally like I just couldn't take my eyes off. My mom's dragging me out, kicking and screaming, and so I bugged her so much she went down and bought us a little tiny table.
Okay.
And we played a lot of football. We played a lot of baseball growing up. So, and the next thing you know, I got 20 guys at my house. We took the legs off because the table was so small, and we played hours on this thing every day. And so that's my foosball story for the first one I ever.
Now, do you remember what kind of a table that might have been?
I couldn't have. I was like 5. There's no way.
Yeah.
It was.
So you were 5 at the time.
Well, maybe a little older than that, but basically, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's extraordinary. And so, as you got into the grade school years and later on, and you started to see foosball more and more often, was there anyone else in your crowd? Anybody, a friend that you used to play with?
Yeah, actually, I'm from a little small town called Bradenton, Florida, which is most people they may know Sarasota, Siesta Key area.
Yep.
It's south of Clearwater. But there was actually a little group. There was me and Chris Starcheski, who I think is the best player ever played the game, just my opinion.
Okay.
We grew up since we were just kids. And Rick Inocencio, he's actually my stepbrother, and a buddy of ours, Kurt. But, people don't understand. Jim would understand this because back then, even in a small town, you would have 10 tables. You go somewhere, start about noon, at 8 o'clock, they finally throw you out, and there's 50 people still playing. So,
right.
Then you leave there, you go down to the next place till midnight. Then you hit the beach till about 2 a.m. So you really never stop. There'd be like 50 quarters on the table, and everybody knew exactly when they were up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. When was the first time you actually went to an official tournament to compete?
First time I ever went to an official tournament, I was probably about 12 or 13.
Wow.
And we walked in, and you got to understand, we're kind of country guys. So we walk into this place, and I don't know who these people are. I see this little skinny loudmouth guy, Johnny Horton, and Paul Reynolds, and these guys that are masters. And Horton scores a shot, and he comes around the table and tells me and my brothers and my friends to get out of his way. It wasn't a good idea. And he kind of looked at us and he goes, "If you don't mind." So
that was your first experience of Johnny.
Real
Horton?
Inviting.
Get out of my
inviting
way.
Master. He's seriously.
Well, actually, my brother looked at it, he goes, "Hey, we'll fit right in here," But anyway, it was just funny. Yeah. So I mean, we walked in, and we were the local heroes, and we beat everybody, and we walked in there, and we were like, "Wow, these guys are just a little bit better than we are."
Just a little bit, just a smidge. And was there a moment that you can relate to us when you actually did win in that crowd? Do you remember that moment?
Well, yeah, because, I know, this is kind of the shady dark side of the foosball years, but, a lot of gambling used to go on. And the funny part was we were definitely gamblers. So
come on,
so we, the pressure never bothered us. If you live in Florida, believe me, trash talk and pressure is not a problem. So, and I was probably about 15 years old, and the guy, it was called Golden Keg, and all these guys are there, and me and Chris Starcheski we won the tournament. I'm not even supposed to be in there at 15. The guy says, if I see you drink, I'm throwing you out. So I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so Chris was about 17. Chris is an incredible player. And we just started kind of going from there. We actually started winning some locals and stuff.
So you have Starcheski at number 1. You got Collignon at 2. And then Lafredo at 3 on your greatest players list. A couple of questions for you.
I'm up there. Don't forget about me.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. Mark Torres, for sure. Real quick, Mike Green, are you a Pittsburgh Pirates fan? Because
No.
Bradenton, Florida, the
Right.
longtime home, spring training home of the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah.
My baseball knowledge got in the way there.
No, actually, as kids, we climbed up on the dugouts and watched them play for free. So we were at the boys' club. So,
cool.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was going to just say, basically, when you grew up like we grew up, for television, when sports started, you had the Cubs or the Braves. So I was a lifetime Braves fan.
Right. That was WGN or WTBS or TBS.
WTBS, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you talked about Starcheski, who was a great player. Another guy, probably a victim of not winning an open singles or open doubles world championship, although he was always in the mix, especially on Tornado in the late 80s, early 90s. Did finish second, I believe, to Terry Moore in open singles at the Worlds, won a mixed doubles world championship, I believe. Great guy, great player, absolutely great player. And on the fringe, on the bubble of being a Hall of Famer. But that Tampa area, even back in the 80s, obviously you mentioned Johnny Horton coming out of there, Ricky Benitez and others who really made that. And again, trash talkers, all of them, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, there may have been a little money exchanging hands and some fierce competition down there, but it was a really prime area of developing foosball players during the late 70s and in through the mid and 80s and then beyond into the 90s with other players like Tom Yor, Bob Diaz, etc. Talk a little bit about your experiences playing there locally, because you were just south of there. I believe Bradenton's just south of the Bay.
Yeah, we played most of all of our tournaments in Tampa, but I mean, it was just, you can't really explain it. I mean, we would have sometimes 60 teams at a local tournament, and then when we were done, we would go to Ricky Benitez's house and have a 25-team tournament with only one table.
Wow.
Single elimination, one game.
Oh my God! Yeah, I've been in those, and they're double elimination, and they go for like 14 hours, and everybody's pissed off. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, 18 hours later, I'm the only one who didn't drink, so I won the tournament every week. But no, it was, like I said, I've heard you guys talk on here and different people saying like generational, you have Brandon Moreland and his father, and of course, Brandon's an incredible player. But, for us, we didn't really need that because there was always been a handful of world champions there. And actually, you got to mention Jim Dumas in that. He's my friend, first of all, but he sponsored us, me and Horton, and in the 80s had indoor sports. He actually sponsored one year, like 27, I think, people at the Worlds.
Jeez.
And he actually gave us a house to live in, and we went down there, and sometimes we would have, 25 people staying in this house for 3 or 4 weeks before tournaments. You'd have national champions, world champions, U.S. Open champions, and so it was just nonstop foosball practice. I mean, that's all we did. We didn't, and so nobody was ever intimidated by anybody, when it came to that kind of thing. So
and I got to ask you about that because, so I have a hard time with this, the generational thing. Well, we're talking about different things, but I have a hard time with it because I'm from a rough part of town. I'm from East San Jose, and everything was rough about it, and people were not nice. And there's a lot of ugly stuff going on, and it was in the foosball too, right? It was culturally part of the foosball. People were not intimidated to make eye contact and engage each other, and people fought for their quarters because that quarter was a lot of money. It was a lot of money, and so there was a lot of character building. And our sport in general is a kinder, gentler, and it's a kinder, gentler generation of players playing it. And I don't want to be two down with my narrow myopic filter. Man, my filter about engaging the opponent, all that kind of stuff, which I think livens the game. You're talking about Tampa and Florida foosball, the same kind of thing. I started this thing on Facebook. I think you've seen it. What is your opinion about modifying or softening that rule? And let's take trash talk out of it. Let's not call it trash talk. Let's call it engaging your opponent. Engaging your opponent. Period. In having fun with it. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, let me first of all explain what happened to foosball. 25, 30 years ago, Todd doesn't like people to play too rough. He wants things perfect for himself. So, I mean, Todd's my hero. He is absolutely my number one hero. But, Todd started that years ago. And basically, he's groomed this game to the point where as long as he's got it now where nobody's afraid to talk and nobody wants to move their men, because who can beat Todd if you can't, move your men? I mean, if you think you're ever going to beat a Tony Friedman or anybody like that by just being quiet. I've seen these guys play games for 5 games and they're playing exactly the same, and all of a sudden it's meatball, and the one says, I think you cheated me. The other one says, yeah, I think I did. For me, that is like LeBron James driving to the hoop, sees a guy in the lane with 2 seconds for a world title, he elbows him, gives him the elbow. He's not going to stop playing and say, I should have done that. I'm taking the title back. So and I'll give you a great example of what you call trash talk, but I don't call it trash talk. I call it head games.
Yes.
I came back, I hadn't played in probably 15 years, and I called my buddy Frank Kronkowski and said, hey, I'm going to Georgia, let's play. He goes, all right. So we walk up to the table, and who's there but Ryan Moore? He was still a pro. I didn't know Ryan, but I knew Mary. I knew her son. I knew who he was. So we started playing, and he's going, oh, you played with Johnny back, 100 years ago, we're just having a little fun back and forth. And yeah. So the match is going on. He scores the first one, and he makes a comment. Well, I learned a long time ago playing Europeans, if you look at what they're doing, you're never going to block them. So I never looked at what he was doing. I just moved my man, I kept in front of the hole, and I blocked the crap out of him. And during that time, I kept messing with him. We were going back and forth. I called a timeout. I said, listen, I know I'm old, and you're probably the stunt double. Please go get Ryan Moore. You're just not him. Now, he's laughing the whole time, right? So we're going back there. He scores a beautiful shot on me. And he's like, yeah, that looked like Ryan Moore. And I'm like, da-da-da-da. So they beat us meatball. And after the match, he walks up to him and he goes, Gramps, you had me twisted, man. I didn't know whether to call a timeout, shoot, let the guy up front. And he's laughing. And it was all fun. That's just head games. It's not. People who now, I saw your thing, and everybody thinks that everybody's going to walk into a room, and everybody in the whole place is cussing each other out, and taking a swing at each other. It's ridiculous. It's not about that at all, So anyway, that's my opinion on that. I'll tell you what. I was having a conversation with Sissy Whipple, who's a super nice person, and I said, these guys are celebrities. Tony told me he wants people cheering. You don't care who they cheer for, just cheer. And she said it was disrespectful. That's why people don't do it. How could it be disrespectful to cheer for your idols? I don't understand that. Maybe that's the old guy in me, but anyway, that's my point.
Here's my mind game story, and I'll be brief about this. In 2017, I walk into a tournament room, Hall of Fame, and I don't have a partner, and Billy Pappas doesn't have a partner. And I haven't touched a table, like literally touched a table, except for 5 minutes in Asia, twice, like 2 minutes in Shanghai and 2 minutes in Hong Kong. That's it. My total table time in years is minutes. And so I walk into this tournament room. Billy doesn't have a partner. I don't have a partner. We decided to play together. We got from where we were to winning a match against Robert and Tony purely by sheer will and a little bit of mind games. And so we're playing for fifth in the winners bracket of open doubles versus Robbie and Tony. And my phone rings, and it's my wife and my kids. And in the middle of the match, I think between games, or maybe between ball, I don't know, whatever it is. I answer the phone, and I'm talking to my wife and kids FaceTime on the pit table, number one. And the whole crowd is watching. And for some reason, this is some unheard of thing. It's some really bizarre thing. Even Billy's a little flustered. Tony and Robbie are definitely, I look up and they're definitely getting flustered because I'm on my phone. And I think, you know what? I'm going to show my phone to everybody in the crowd. And so I show my wife and kids, And I show and I tell, I'm blowing kisses. I'm telling them I love them. I gotta go. I'm probably at the tail end of whatever it is, 60 seconds between games. And I smile politely and I hang up. And from that moment on, I had complete control of that match because I was on my phone and it was so out of bounds and so awkward and so alarming and so weird. And it got in Tony's head. And to this day, Tony will tell you he hates that moment. We talk about it. We have fun with it. But those are little tiny things that should not be like earth-shattering moments in foosball. And there should be more moments like that. People should be having fun, engaging, looking. I should be able to look at my opponent's eyes and say something half-hearted, fun, competitive. And you can't do that in foosball, and foosball hurts because of it. Anyway, moving on. Thank you. I made this show about me too, by the way. Every week I make it about me somehow. And I appreciate your time, Mike. Thank you.
Okay.
You're listening to FoosTalk Live on Foosball Radio with our special guest, Mark Torres. I mean, Mike Green.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
You know, Mike, we're gonna obviously get to the big topic, which is about your partnership with Johnny Horton.
Yes.
But one thing, and you and I have run into each other in the last 5 years or so, a couple of times down in Florida and such. But you remain a foosball fan. You've talked about Ryan Moore. You've talked about Tony Spradham. You've talked about your knowledge of the game remains pretty strong because you still enjoy listening, watching, and playing foosball, don't you?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I always tell these guys, that I think the biggest problem with foosball today is that, the problem is when you get, and I love Johnny a lot, but we all know how he can be, so if you didn't play in TS, then you couldn't play. I heard a famous guy named Billy something or other, I'm not going to say his last name, but that anybody that played Dynamo should have an asterisk by their name, shouldn't even count.
Oh.
And, and then you got the guys today, and I just don't get it. I mean, for me, I had a poster of Todd Lafredo on my wall. I practiced every day as a kid saying, I'm going to beat that guy. Well, I never got to that level of that, but I did when it already went away, TS. But so then when we would go, me and Johnny went to the Worlds, he kept talking about Spear and Lafredo. And I don't mean this in any disrespect. I go, listen, man, I'm sick of hearing about Lafredo's Spear. You beat Bacon and Shalafo or you don't win, period. And he kept bringing, I said, listen, man, I'm not even going to go with you if you freaking keep talking about them guys. Those are yesterday's heroes. We're playing Bacon and Tony Bacon and Don Shalafo in the finals, and that's what's going to happen if we make it there. And we want to play them 14 games and 15 games. So yeah, I mean, there's just that people have lost, and it's a lot of the old guys' fault because when their immortality starts running out, like Reynolds wants to be in the Hall of Fame and all these. I always say, if you got to talk someone into putting you in the Hall of Fame, you should be there. But anyway, just my opinion is that if people really need to, I mean, I look at those guys yesterday in the middle and today in the same, eyes. I look at it like if you were a champion in the 70s, 80s, 90s, if you're a Tony Spradham, a Doug Furry, if you're, a Tony Bacon, whoever you are, you're going to be a champion no matter what. Throw them all in a pot, put them on an equal table, and they're all the same age. It's going to be the most fun you ever had watched. That's my opinion.
No doubt. I like that scenario. I think that would be an awesome way to look at it. And so, Mike, here's a quick question for you. Let's say we go back into the peak of your career. Was there a time that you can remember, a specific match where you walked up to the table and you were 100% sure in your own mind you were going to lose that match, but you ended up winning it? When would that moment be, and who was it you were playing?
I've never had that moment.
No.
I'm just being honest.
Okay.
I've never. When I went to a tournament, I honestly looked at a tournament and I got in a lot of trouble one time with some experts saying this, but I looked at the tournament and I knew who was there, and I said that basically tournaments don't start till 5th or better. That's my opinion. Yeah, you battle through the things, but basically by the time you hit around 5th or better, that's when you see who's left and what the winner's going to look like. And and for me, it's part of growing up in Tampa, because as John Soler says, who's going to make you nervous anywhere in the world when you live in Tampa? When even today you go, we got Tony Spradham, we got Midori, we got, Tommy Orr. I mean, you could go on and on. I mean, there's really, I always thought, I mean, to be honest with you, I took it so serious. When I see guys today and they lose a match and they sit at the table and they want to have a conversation immediately, there's no way. I just had to leave.
Okay.
I could come back. Give me a few minutes. I could come back. But the way I looked at it was, you just took the most important thing in my life away from me. I don't want to talk to you right now.
Right. I get you.
I'll come back in 10 minutes to give you a hug. But right now, I just need some time. I mean, to me, I don't understand. I've just never had that moment where I thought I was going to lose, to be honest.
Okay. Oh, well, but I appreciate your candor on that one for sure. And if there's one person alive or living or dead, was there one person that you never got a chance to play with that you would absolutely want to play with?
Yeah, Dave Gummison.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Dave Gummison. Now let me. All right, I'm going to rephrase that because you just asked me a question that made me rethink my what I said. Dave Gummison did put some fear into me. I didn't necessarily think I was going to lose, but Dave, I love Dave's game, his takeoff. You know, I was known as a pull shot blocker. I didn't fear anybody's pull shot. But Dave Gummison, you know, I've always said a lot of people, you know, if you teamed up with the right person at the right time, that's when you become super team, you know, super championship guys. And Dave, I mean, not that he didn't play with great players early on, like in Dynamo, but no, it would definitely be Dave Gummison 100%. He would be the guy I would, if I could go back in my prime and his prime. In fact, I was going to ask him to play in the 86 Worlds, and I was supposed to play with Tony Bacon, and he decided to play with Donnie, don't me?
Oh, no kidding.
So I wanted to play with, I called Adrian because Adrian, I just played him in a tournament. I knew Adrian was a super incredible player, so I asked him to play instead. But we wound up playing for the winners bracket, so it wasn't all that bad.
Dave, there's nothing worse than especially early 90s, Dave, than a pull shooter who has a whippy spray that goes dead man every once in a while. It's like just a whippy spray long, and every once in a while he goes way around, like right when he needs to, he goes way around. But the most incredible shooting performance in an open singles world championship was the year Dave Gummison, and he'll tell you right now that he never shot again like that, like he did in that world championship. He scored every time he got it on his 2-bar, and he either hit the min and flipped the min over, or he scored. His 2-bar was absolutely insane. When I watched him win that open singles world championship, I thought he'll never lose again in open singles ever again. It was such an aberration though, because he could never shoot like that again. But I guess I'll ask you, man, Mike, was his hesitation wall pass, has it been the same on every table? Because that thing is stupid fast. I mean, it's really dumb how fast it is. Was it the same on TS as it was on Dynamo?
I mean, honestly, I think if you put Dave on J.C. Penney's $29 table, he's going to do the same pass. So he's always had that 5-rod, and it's incredible. Yes, he absolutely. I mean, I don't know as much about the TS part, but definitely the Dynamo part. He definitely, and then he would do that with a little quick chip up, which really killed you. I mean, he'd just be doing like 90 miles an hour to the wall and then chip it up between your men, and you're just like, okay. But
awesome.
Yeah.
My memories of Gummison during that era, and we don't look at him this way necessarily as much as maybe we should, but he was a very athletic player. This is a guy, when you watched him play, man, he did things that nobody else did. Super talent, right? And later he became, I think people looked at him as more of a mechanical type of player on Tornado later on, and with all the success with Tracy McMillan. But he was an amazing player during the 1980s. Yeah. He was so fun to watch, so gifted, such a competitor, and so again there was that sense of the mechanics being so fundamentally consistent. I'm sure he practiced quite a bit, but Dave was an amazing player, no question about it, and would put the fear into almost anyone, no question about it. So you mentioned early in the interview, or maybe even in the top 5, that you played with other players, and you had some experience playing the goalie position for others, and I think you said you played with Adrian. But your primary partner, the one you're most known for, the one you won the world championship with, was Johnny Horton. Maybe the most infamous player in the history of the sport, maybe the best showman in the history of the sport. And there's a fine line there, right? From infamy on one side to showman on the other. And unfortunately, Johnny did cross that line a little too often. But this guy was an extraordinary competitor, was super talented and could work the opponent like nobody. We talked with Mark and talking about getting involved verbally with the opponents. Johnny was as good as anybody ever has been with that. Talk a little bit, and I don't know if it's a little bit, but talk about your experiences playing with Johnny Horton.
Well, Carl Miller always told me that, see, most people don't realize Johnny never really won doubles. The only world title he ever got in doubles was with me. And they said, because he would only listen to me, because he was more intimidating than anything, to be honest with you. And yeah, Johnny was a tough guy to play with. I mean, no doubt about it. Like I said, you walk up to a table and, if there's 400 people sitting in the bleachers, you can bet 350 of them are going to be screaming at you. And I actually had, I don't remember her name now, but she was from Colorado. And the first tournament I played with Johnny, and she's standing on the end of the bleacher screaming at me, going, "You're just another idiot playing for this guy." And Mike Bowers actually had to throw her out of the tournament room. And but anyway, it was Johnny and me we've known each other. I knew him since I was 13. And I know a lot about Johnny, and he's had a rough go of it, but I never was a guy to take any grief off anybody. And this guy asked me one time, he goes, "Man, you guys have the most intense timeouts I've ever seen. What are you discussing? What's your strategy?" And I say, "My strategy," you say, "Why don't you get a block?" And I said, "You know what? If you just block 1-5 out of 300, we'd probably already win this thing. So why don't you just shut up and get away from me?" We would just go at it. And I'd say, "Why don't you pin the ball up? Because your pull shot's the weakest thing in here, man. Why don't you get Chad to give you some lessons on speed?"
Those are great. Those are my favorite timeouts.
Yeah.
You just could rip your friend in half. I love that.
So he looks at me, he goes, "Oh, shut up, let's go win." So then we'd go back and, go right back into it. But, Johnny was a rough guy to play with. And, even sitting back, and most people don't know this, but when I won the world championships, and I love this story because right after we won, he says, "Man, we're going to double and win again next year." And I said, "No, I'll never play with you again." He goes, "Yeah, you can." I go, "No, trust me, I won't." And, so I was sitting on a bus, and that Doug Furry was at that tournament, another one of my idols. And he's on the way back, and me and Doug had, did a lot of talking that weekend, and just what a great guy. And Horton's in the very front of the bus, and I'm in the back going to the airport. And he says, "Green, we're on for next year." And I go, "I'll never play with you again as long as I live." And he goes, "You will." And I go, "Johnny, you suck. You got no shot. You're over, man. You're history. You're yesterday's news, man. You got me where I wanted to be. Now I'm moving on without you." And, and Doug says, "Dude, you guys are brutal." And I go, "No, I said he loves it." And then you hear this voice in the front go, "Yeah, I do."
That's funny. Oh my God.
He's a masochist. He's a masochist. He wanted you to kick him right in the face, and that would have just ended the conversation on a high note.
Yeah. It was just so aggravating to see a guy who, in my opinion, was probably one of the top 5 players ever play the game, and just went so many bad directions. And, for a lot of reasons, I know why, but playing with Johnny, I mean, I would never pass it up for anything in the world, but he just, like, in our first match, he belittled this team and asked him why they even signed up. They're just ruining his arm. And I knew right then, no matter what happened after that tournament, we'd never play together again. So.
And you didn't,
no.
huh? Yeah. Wow, man.
No, that's not actually true. We wound up playing about a year later on Tornado, and when he was sober. So we went to a tournament, and he looks at me.
Newsflash.
He says, "I can't score. I can't pass, but I'm having the most fun I ever had in my life." I go, "Me too, bro. This is all I ever wanted anyways. That's
great. Cool. That's really great.
Yeah.
Man, it's tragic how demons play into greatness sometimes. Not with, some people are very fortunate to have their demons managed and be great at the same time. And then there's this subset of greatness that comes with all the accompanying madness. It's in every sport.
Yep.
There's someone.
Sure.
And it oftentimes it holds them back from reaching their maximum potential. And foosball is probably because foosball is such a particular type of nuanced sport, right? To be great at foosball and like the endorphins and all the things that are happening when you're all the things that happen that click when you love foosball, and what it takes to be great, how addictive it is, and the obsessions you have to be good, watching this little ball do these little things. And so it even plays into more addictive personalities to begin with. So unfortunately, Johnny represents that guy for us, and he's just remembered so fondly in different ways that he's the guy he is, man, the ultimate villain, and still cherished.
The bad part was when we went to a tournament. I mean, honestly, there'd be 30 people waiting on him to walk through the door with me, just to try to get them to go hang out and do whatever. And I'd tell them, listen, you guys scramble. I don't even want to see none of your faces. And we'd go to our room. That's what we did. We went to the Worlds, and I told him, I was like, I don't care what you do, but tonight you're going to stay in this room with me, and that's where we're at. And he did, and we won, so it worked. So.
Wow. Yeah, and my experience with Johnny, and he would tell you that I was his Howard Cosell, right?
Yeah.
And he was Muhammad Ali. And there's some truth to that. My experience with Johnny goes back, 30 years and beyond even. And it had a lot of ups and downs. He was a showman, so he was always putting on a show, oftentimes for me. During the course of matches, Johnny would look up at me immediately after doing something, after talking about Muhammad Ali or Joe Montana.
Jim, I have to tell you that you're much better looking than Howard Cosell.
Well, thank you very much, Tom Robinson. And none of our listeners even remember Howard. Maybe a few of you.
No.
Great broadcaster. But, over the last 10 years, and this includes a few appearances at the World Championship by Johnny, he and Steve Bynum reached the finals in open doubles. I think it was 2013, 2014, in an amazing performance. A couple of huge wins. And if you haven't seen them, when you get a chance, folks, watch that event with Johnny Horton and Steve Bynum. A couple of matches were amazing. But he and I became pretty good friends. He was sober this last 10 years when I've seen him. And we became pretty good friends. There was some common ground there that I think we could relate to each other where others perhaps couldn't. And but there were some real choppy moments during the course of that, and both on and off the table, when he would abuse opponents, lower ranked opponents, when he would trash a hotel room, when I can remember one match, and I don't. Hopefully, Johnny doesn't mind me talking too much about this, but where he was very abusive of his mixed doubles partner, who then forfeited, and he ended up being kicked out of the tournament. These sorts of things happened. His own demons, as Mark said, and yet it's still maybe the most compelling player to ever play the game. And a lot of it is because maybe you want to see that car wreck, but a lot of it is also the talent was there, the attempt at showmanship, the organic showmanship that was there with Johnny. How he would celebrate and he'd work the opponents, and you couldn't take your eyes off him, right? And so here you are playing with Johnny Horton. You're the bad guy because you're playing with him, right?
Yeah.
And so you had to deal with 90% of the crowd rooting against you, and this lady from Colorado standing up and screaming obscenities at you. It had to be a challenge for you, but again, it's something that you're glad you went through. I'm glad my Johnny Horton days were there as well. And he is sort of the theme tonight by proxy through you and our flashback earlier. But again, the success was there, but you win the World Championship, and you said, "That's it. I'm not going to go through that again." And we can shift gears a little, talk about some of your other partners. But there still has to be a residual effect. You still probably feel kind of fondly about Johnny Horton, I would think, not just because of the wins, but because down deep, Johnny's actually a pretty good dude. And you just almost regret what maybe he could have been.
By the way,
I absolutely love the guy, man. I'd do anything in the world for him. I actually flew up to Minnesota about 4 years ago just to hang out with him when he needed someone to hang out with him. So, I could tell you a trillion stories off the table, man, where the guy is the best guy in the world. I mean, the guy won. He got third place in open singles on TS at 15 years old. Yeah. Doug Furry says, "Hey, I'm going to buy you a V8." He didn't know what a V8 was. V8. He wins the Worlds at 17 years old. I mean, the guy's just a phenom, and it's always been, those guys are always there. Not that he needs any help, but it's a shame. It really is, because I believe that Johnny would have won so many singles events that maybe not Tony Friedman style, but he'd have been up there. I mean, he was incredible to watch that guy play. Being behind him was just amazing. And, things that people never even caught that he did on the table, just like the same thing I'd say about Gummison. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Jim. Good guy.
I don't think anyone could dominate back then. Frankly, no disrespect I believe this to be true. I believe Tony dominates in any era, but I don't think he dominates the way he dominates now, just because the exponential number of players makes it very. Styles make matchups in foosball the way it does in boxing. That's why one guy could beat another guy that could beat another guy, but not the inverse or not circular. And I think Tony has to deal with way more different types of styles of play and just a sheer number of more people. So that's why people that dominated back then in any capacity were amazing. I was going to add, though, you keep talking about this lady from Colorado. And it could have been Robert Mares, because Robert Mares had 3 feet of hair back then. So he might have been the guy.
Rob's going to love
yelling
that.
at you from the stands.
He's going to love that. Look out.
No,
Mark.
actually, Robert Bears was over in the corner rubbing his mood rocks he used to carry with him. So.
Channeling his crystals.
Yeah.
He's going to listen to this. He's going to hate me.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I was just kidding. When I met him, he was standing there with these rocks in his hand, and he goes, "What do you think about these?" And I just walked away. How do you know?
So this is so.
But I'm glad you brought that up about Tony, because I say Tony is like the greatest tornado player there's ever been. But I always tell Tom, we have this argument. Tom says this and Tom says that. I said, Tom, if they took quarter of an inch off that hole on both sides, you'd be winning a lot more tournaments.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And I've also, like when I've heard you, Mark, say, well, his pool kick would have won on any table. I'm not so sure about that. People blocked pool kicks back then. And if you scored, I'm not trying to be funny, but push kicks and pull kicks were not, they were hard to score. You had to really be a Thor Donovan or somebody to get it. I mean, people had defenses. People don't think that little bit of hole on each side makes a difference. Well, I'd have to disagree with that, but that's just my opinion.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think a smaller goal changes the game radically. It's especially even slop. There's less slop, and that's an exponential thing. If there's 10 to 15% less chance of scoring because you slice off 7.5% from each side, that's a massive difference. And that makes the goalie incredibly more dominant. I think the finer point, though, is that I have some memory because it's the 90s, and the 90s were nothing like the 70s. But I talked about this on a much earlier broadcast. When you had full brackets, having to play those 2 extra matches added, especially 2 without a rollover. So now you're a wrist shooter, shoulder shooter with 2 extra matches. The mental toughness, the durability, the endurance to win these longer tournaments. And then you add the variables so it's like now you got to, you win 2 or 3 matches now, and you're playing someone you're familiar with. Granted, it's a master. It's a great player. Back in the 90s, you had to play some rookie team that was hot as heck, right? Because they probably won their first round match. Yeah. Then you had to play a top pro team you never heard of before. And there, like in the 90s, you'd have upsets all the time. The time that you have like a top team playing I was one of those upset teams before. When I was a rookie with Fernando, we upset Gummison and Mose. They were the number 2 seed. You had upsets all the time. So just the exponential amount of variables added by bigger brackets changed the entire dynamic of the sport. It made it way more competitive and way more trying. And I'm going back to my romantic 90s, and you can go back to the 80s and 70s. But it's all true, man. I believe it to be true. I believe Tony's still dominant. I believe it's much more difficult for him to win, however.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd agree with Mark, but it's like any other sport. It's like baseball, basketball, football, whatever. I mean, Babe Ruth was the best player in 1927. Could he come in today at 5'11" and 240 pounds and do what he did? Probably not. But it's the best player for that particular era for sure. And so, with the Horton thing, again, we'll put a close on that. But, we all think about Johnny and what he's doing and where he is these days. And it's admirable that you went up there and were his friend again for 4 years. And I'm sure his memories of you are amazing as well. Are you still playing much? Do you still get out and play much these days, Mike?
No, not at all. I don't. But I have to tell you one thing, though. You asked me about people that I played with that I enjoyed. And I have to tell you my Adrian Zamora story, because I tell everybody that I was supposed to play with Bacon, and that's when he didn't want to play. So I called Adrian, and I said, and me and Tony had just gotten second place in super whatever it was, doubles or some event. But he wanted to play with Don. And so I called Adrian and said, "Hey, Adrian, Mike Green, you want to play Worlds?" And he goes, "Yeah, right." I was like, "Okay, you don't want to?" He goes, "No, come on, man. What was his? I can't think of his buddy's name. Scott Stewart." He goes, "Come on, Scott. That's not funny, man." And I'm like, hey, bro, here's my number. Call me in Florida. So he calls me, and I go, hey, Adrian. He goes, is this Mike Green? It's like, yeah. So he's like, you're the defending world champion. Why would you want to play with me? I go, because I just played you. You're awesome. So anyway, we wound up playing, and I was telling Mark this story earlier. So we're doing good, and we're playing for fifth or better, I think. And we had to play Gummison and Evan, and they were destroying us like 2 games to nothing, like 4-2 or 3-2. I don't remember. And I looked at him and I said, look, we got them right where we want them. And he's like, we got them where we want them. I go, yeah, man, they got to put us away. I said, just start plugging points on them, man. We can do this. And I said, no, I'm serious. They want to win so bad. They can't stand it, man. Let's do something about it. So we come back and won the match and wound up playing for the winner's bracket. And we had to play the next day. And me and Carl Miller are standing there, and he says, you're going to lose tomorrow. And I go, yeah, I already know that. He goes, what? And he says, and I look over, and Adrian's got this big, one's a star, the other side's this big lightning bolt. He's got like this 60-ounce drink in his hand, and he's just signing autographs and kissing babies, boy.
Oh, man.
We were laughing about it. And, but you know what? Adrian couldn't have done anything to upset me. I mean, what a class act and what a great guy to play with.
Yeah, for sure. And Mark talked a little bit about how big the brackets were back then, and that's a great point, Mark, and probably one of the reasons we don't see too many kick shots remaining. And that's something I think, if I do have a regret, over the last 15 years, is that we don't have kick shots. And I'm a kick shooter, that, Mike.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see more pull kicks, love to see more push kicks. They can be successful offensive ploys. But the other thing too was in the decade of the 80s, and going back to that Dynamo era. And Mark touched on this earlier as well. There was still that residual player base from the tournament soccer era. And they played the game during that tour, during that era, at the highest level. These guys were practicing every day. They were making notes. They were competing on a very regular, maybe twice monthly basis at big events. And they took the sport to the highest level it's ever gone. In fact, you could say that the American style of play was created during that period because just the evolution kept getting pushed forward by people getting better and better, playing for a living, etc. And into the 80s, you still had some of that. You still had that approach. You still had that intensity, the aggressiveness, the competitiveness on the table that maybe we've lost a little bit over the last 20 years for whatever reason. This also goes back to maybe the interaction of the crowds as well. But it was not only in Florida, in Tampa, where everybody was playing so hard, the TS tour where everybody was competing, down in Houston, Texas in the 80s, the mid-80s, the late 80s, and Dallas, Texas, where these guys were going outside and fighting between matches because it was that intense. But we lost a lot of that later on. And so you organically, naturally, and you've displayed it many times tonight, you were a fighter, man. When Tom asked you, did you ever fear and think you were going to lose? You said, heck no, man. I never thought I was going to lose. Come on. What are you thinking? I'm going into this thinking I can win, thinking I can compete. And maybe that's something we need to try to generate again, or at least develop the environment that creates that sort of situation, because it was amazing. And we don't really get that anymore, do we?
No. And I'll tell you what, it's funny. And this is a quick story. Bacon comes to Florida. He's the man. He'd already won 1 or 2 worlds, or I'm not even sure. He comes down to Florida, and there's me and Star. People don't realize when you come to Florida, guys you've never seen in your life are going to destroy you. Terry Moore and Diaz played these 2 local guys. Can't think of the guy's name, and they just destroyed them. And Terry's like, they got lucky. Then Terry plays my buddy, who's an expert in singles, and gets beaten singles. And so while they were down there, me and Star, they had an East Coast, West Coast, Florida State tournament, and it was just like being at the Worlds, watching, the names. And so we destroyed them. So then we went to the Worlds in 84, and we're the only team that actually beat Bacon in the 84 Worlds. And me and Star went up to play him, and some guy goes, who the heck is Chris Green and Mike Starcheski? and Bacon looks at me and goes, get out of my face. They're the guys that just wiped me out in Florida in 2 terms like I didn't belong on the table with them. So we lost the first game, and I'm coming around the thing, and the guy says, yeah, like you're going to win this one. And I reach in my pocket, and I know this is frowned upon these days by a lot of people, but I pulled out 500 and said, "How much do you want out of it?" We already spotted them a game. And all these guys are like freaking out, like, what? And Bacon says, if somebody says one word or takes that bet, don't ever talk to me again. So he went around the table, being star destroyed him the next 3 games, and Bacon just walks up to me, he goes, "You're evil, evil, evil."
Oh man,
love the sense of
humor.
humor.
No, I mean, I have this saying, and I get myself in trouble because Tony asked me. He says, "What's wrong with today's game, in your opinion, than it used to play?" And I said, "Now that gets me in trouble because I don't say things correctly and politically correct." And he says, "Well, no, tell me." I said, "People don't have no heart no more. Nice pass, nice shot. Thanks for beating me. Let me join you at the table afterwards, and you're going to explain all the reasons why you beat me, and I'm going to walk away. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to be depressed for 3 months until I can at least figure out a way to be competitive." And so would anybody else that played back then. Nobody's going to just take, no matter how good he is, nobody's just going to take say, "Oh, well, he's just too good to be beat." I mean, it just doesn't even register in people's brain. And and that mentality, I just don't understand it. I really don't. I mean, I don't know any sport you could be a LeBron James, anything. You have to want to win that bad. And that's how I feel about it anyway.
I agree with you, man. I totally agree with you. There were levels like don't get me wrong, and I played it both ways. I was a fanboy of the sport and the players, but I wanted to crush them. I wanted to eat them alive. I wanted to tear them apart, man. I wanted to play all the top players, and I wanted to drill them. And it was because that's the environment I'm from, and it could be. You don't have to hate your opponent. I mean, there's all these kind of ideas, levels of where that comes from and where that goes. You don't have to hate them. You just have to want to do everything to win. You have to, if you really want to be a world champion, if you really want to be a Hall of Famer, you gotta want to get in the trenches and you gotta want to fight for it. And that's when the human emotion, human side of the game, and the drama we're missing from the game, that's where that comes from. Because and we go back to Johnny. And to a lesser extent, Tommy and Steve Murray. For all the
Murray, lesser extent.
Oh, I know, man. Once again, I could like romanticize my heroes. Murray is probably at least as bad, but without all the off the table craziness, Murray was. Murray would control the entire 300-yard diameter around the sphere around his matches. He had complete command of everybody. If there were 4 judges, he had all 4 judges intimidated. Then he had everyone in the audience intimidated, and anyone he had eye contact, he had intimidated. And it was a beautiful thing to watch. Wouldn't you agree? That emotion was an amazing thing to watch.
Oh, absolutely. I always say Murray's the only guy I've ever known that can be all the way across the table, this face right in your face, and he never takes his hands off the rod. I'm still not sure I used to do that, but well, I've heard you guys say like the North, Cali, South Cali kind of thing, and I totally get it. Because when we were playing, it was the Florida against Chicago, against Colorado, against California. I mean, there were rivalries. Like, I didn't realize how bad. I invited Bacon up to our room. There's about 30 guys from Florida, and we walked in. Man, it was ice cold. I mean, they're looking at me like, you just lost your airline ticket. What's that guy doing in my room?
Right. I love that, man.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've lost that competitive rivalry stuff. It just ain't there no more. I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah, and there's a few reasons for that. I think where the open events aren't quite as prestigious as they used to be, maybe a little watered down in some ways, just because of format, et cetera. That's a topic maybe Mark and I can tackle at some point. About what can we do to kind of bring that environment back. And I'm not sure again it's something you can force necessarily, but you were lucky enough to grow up in it. I was there too. I was the same way, man. It was about competing. I was not friendly with my opponents afterwards, at least immediately afterwards. If I lost a match, I took it hard. It was hard. Even at a local DYP at the pitcher house in Hermosa Beach, California, if I lost on trophy night on a Thursday night in the 3rd round to somebody, it stung, man.
Yeah.
And I wanted to come back at them, and so, but that environment has changed, and there's a variety of reasons for it. But I think identifying and remembering the way it used to be, is something I think we can build on moving forward. And that's one thing about 2020. It's been a difficult year for all of us, but it's also a chance for us to sort of change the way we've done things, and what can we do moving forward to improve things, and learn from history.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Mike. Yep.
No, I was going to say, for me, I think the thing that when I came back was kind of like a shock when I'm looking over and I see Tony Spreedham and Ryan Moore. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And there's 15, 20 people. I mean, back when we played, Jim, back in the day, they stopped all matches.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody went to the pit and everybody watched the finals. That's why a lot of those pictures in the crowds were so huge. Not that there weren't a lot of people, but they wanted to watch the matches. They didn't. Instead, we're watching people fighting on table number 17 about some call, and you got these guys playing the finals of these events. That's why I told my wife I want to go so bad to one of the tournaments that you put on, across the pond over there. When they have the I mean the world. I don't even know what they call
World Cup. The World Cup.
Yep. World Cup. I mean, man, I watched that, and I watched the USA win, and I'm in my house, man, and I got tears in my eyes. I'm shivering. I'm watching Murray, I'm thinking my man Murray, because he's not, he's not only Mark's hero, so, and I'm watching this guy, and I'm watching some of these guys win, and I'm just thinking, good for them, man. That is so awesome, because we were actually getting ready to go to Europe when Foosball on Dynamo died. I heard you guys earlier, people don't realize that Tornado was always there. It was just waiting in the wings. We had Tornado in Florida in like 83, 82.
Yes.
So we were already playing. I mean, they knew. See, the thing about a Tornado player is they don't travel. They don't leave their table unless it's like Murray, some of those guys. And they were just always waiting for the downfall. And, hey, it was a great move. They should, it worked out well for them.
Well, Mike, I don't want to take your thunder here, but I wanted to kind of take a couple of seconds out for those of the listeners to FoosTalk Live who are like me, who really don't have the skill level since I'm a beginner, amateur, rookie, beginner. I was wondering if you could share with me, because I love playing goalie. It's if I ever had to choose between goalie and forward, I'd always pick goalie. That is just what I love to do. If you could share with me, because you're one of the greatest goalies, what three things could you share with us that every good goalie should know?
Well, my rule of playing goalie always was I have to outplay the other goalie.
Okay.
As long as I outplay the other goalie, I've done my job, and you never let a slop go in, and you never turn the ball over. No, I don't mean you can be your forward could be so hot he's not missing a point, and you decide you're going to be the superhero and shoot one out of the back, and it rolls to the other guy and he stuffs you, and you lose the game.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we all know that Johnny used to laugh at this because he says, you know why? Mike tells me you just score. Talking's above your pay grade. You let me handle the calls. You let me handle the rules. You just do your job up there. I wouldn't let him get into arguments. I wouldn't let him do those types of things. And you had to, like, when they were coming kind of, I mean, Jim will tell you there was some shady reffing going on back then. So
shady reffing?
You had to kind of you had to get in there sometimes and let them know that they, to me, that's kind of the same thing that's wrong with the game today. It's like the refs have almost made themselves more important than the game. And I don't get it. But,
right.
But anyway, no, I would just honestly say that my whole thing was I always had to outperform the other guy. It doesn't mean scoring every time. It means clearing the ball, just not making silly mistakes and giving your forward an opportunity to win. Because especially on Tornado, who needs to be a hero from the back on Tornado? I mean, even Ryan Moore, as incredible as he is, I've also seen him jerk one out of the back and shoot back in his own hole and lose a match. When maybe he could have just got the ball down to his forward and let him score the ball. I mean, so that's just my opinion.
So if a goalie decides that they want to slow things down and just sit there for 10 seconds before they do anything with the ball, is that something you would recommend?
I would recommend to slow the game down to I would slow it down to a Jeep level. If I was playing Tony and those guys, I would have them so stinking bored. I'm watching guys try to keep up with Tony and Ryan and, even like Blake and these guys. And I'm thinking, what are you doing?
Dude,
You
I'm
are
telling you,
never going to outrun.
you are
It's
right.
like Tom Muir.
Oh, man, you are right. You're
I'm
right.
watching Tom Muir play in Florida State, and I told this kid, I said, he's getting ready to win. He goes, what do you mean? And he goes, watch what's going to happen here. Nobody outplays Tom when he really wants to win. And all of a sudden, he's playing a top player. It was Blake. He actually double dipped him, and he just came out of nowhere, started stealing the ball. The guy goes, how did you know that? And I go, because I don't think guys really know how to change gears anymore.
You're right.
Yep.
They go one speed and that's it. And if something's not going right, they really don't know how to slow it down, speed it up. They don't.
You're right.
They don't know how to. You got to be able to shift the gears and know when to change things up. And people just don't seem to do it anymore.
I got to comment on this, man, because I 100,000% agree with you. And I think it goes back to this idea when there were a lot more styles you had to play against, whether it was 20, 30 plus years ago, you had to be able to adapt more often. And like someone like Spear, he would completely flip the script. Like he had 2 or 3 passes, and that Morey is another one. Steve Morey, Steve Morey was Todd Lafredo's nemesis. Steve Morey Steve Morey would manhandle Todd Lafredo, and it's not like the tic tac and the fast stick and wall series is a new thing. Like Tony does it at a different level. He's like fifth dimension with that. But there's still guys back in the day who would totally change the pace of the game. They would take 10 seconds every time, so that every possession drained the life out of that speedy player. And all of a sudden, 2-1 and 2-2 didn't feel like a fastball anymore because the fast player had a 1-point lead. That style of adapting and forcing the player to come to heel at your speed and tempo is a lost art. And I think there's so much to learn from the past about changing it up, changing your fastball into a knuckleball, and taking the rug out from beneath the other guy. I think you're right, Mike. I think people need to look at the past and bring it to the modern game.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with that even. As a goalie and as a 2-time Nebraska State Open doubles champion myself, I so much of the goalie position, at least the way I play it and the way I preach it, is to control the tempo from back there. Right, you're slowing things down when it needs to be. There's times you're going to pick the pace up, of course, depending on what your forward's doing or the pace of the game generally, whatever. But a lot of it is you're the point guard back there. You're the quarterback. You're the guy that is controlling the tempo of the game. And I recall lots of great goalies from the 70s and 80s who would take 14 and a half seconds every single time they got it back there just to control the tempo, slow it down. And this is for you too, Tom, as a fledgling goalie.
I appreciate
controlling the tempo is huge. And I know, Mike Green, I know you agree with that.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, when I play with Johnny, people don't realize this really, but me and Star we just couldn't get over the hump. We were like beating good teams. And then we were at his house one day because we lived in the same little town. He's got a table and I said, you know what, Star, it's kind of wild. I said, everybody's doing these far wall series. And Star goes, yeah, I've been thinking about that. Why don't we try a far walls passing series? And that's honestly the thing you see Gus Trevino and those guys doing is the brush down thing, and Bob Diaz. That okay for me and Star? Because to be honest, Trevino came up to me in like really early 90s and said, bro, I love it and I got it, but I don't understand one part of that pass. And I said, because you got to like throw your man up, do like the John Zoller does on his little hitch when he's doing his shot. And, you got to throw it up and then get them frozen and then pass it backwards down the lane. And so anyway, like we started doing it, and it was funny. I played with Johnny, and Johnny couldn't catch a pass if you handed it to him, So it was just funny but everybody, as they're doing the match, I can hear the Bowers and those guys doing the match, like what Jim does, and sort of like what Jim does.
Yeah,
but
Thank you for qualifying that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm being nice. They're like, oh, look, Mike just flubbed another pass. But every pass, I slammed it in the Bacon's 5-man, and it came back to Horton's 3-man. Now, you just got, you're thinking on the roll, okay, Johnny can't catch a pass, but he's getting the ball in his fire rod. So I just did it harder and harder, and it kept jumping right back. It's like a 2 to the 5. But, you got to, like I said, from my opinion, you just got to keep them in the game. You got to slow the game. You got to speed it up. sometimes you call a timeout when you know your partner, he don't want you to, but you call it just to slow him down and say, look, man, you're out of control. Relax. Take it easy, you know. It's like the guy that the catcher, you know, he calls timeout and goes out and talks to the pitcher. You just gotta, you're the guy, you're the general in the field, no matter how smart they think they are.
I like that. That makes me feel so much better. That's awesome.
So Mike, and we talked about the fact that you're still a foosball fan. You still follow the game, keep track of it, listen to us every Sunday night apparently, and really enjoy it, which we appreciate. Do you anticipate maybe there'd come a time, and you talked about the World Cup and how much you were impressed by that? Is there a time maybe when you're going to try to come back out on tour and maybe qualify in a senior event or whatever to try to compete for Team USA, or just get back out on tour and play a little bit? Is that something that maybe interests you down the road?
Well, I'll be totally 100% honest with you. I would do it in a heartbeat, but there's two reasons I haven't. You've seen me at a couple tournaments. I usually go to New Orleans just because I like to hang out with Zoller and do some things, you know. But for me, one thing is I'm not paying those ridiculous entry fees to get smashed. I don't want to play expert. I don't know if you remember this, but we were at the tournament that Brendan threw out in Texas on his table. And you looked at me and you said, are you signing up for expert? And I said, no, I would never go below my rank. And you go, good, I'm proud of you.
Yeah, I do recall that. Yeah.
And then right after that, Billy and Rob Atha signed up for pro doubles.
Yes.
And I'm just like, you know, but anyway, my big thing is just, I wouldn't want to go below my level. I don't want a handout. If I'm going to play, I don't care, beat me. But, you know, if I'm not paying this crazy amount, you know, they want $25 for me just to show up and $30 just because I need a ball. And man, I'm just going there to have a little fun, add some money. I'm not playing, you know, if I was there, I would definitely try to win no matter how bad that looked. But I just think, and the other thing is just the fact that I tried and it was so boring. I could not stand it. I absolutely could not stand playing in the tournament. I'm sitting there, and you know, Jim, how people used to play back in the day, especially on TS and Dynamo. I'm just like wiggling my men back and forth. I'm not even moving them. And the guy says, "You're a little rough on the table."
Oh my God.
And I looked at him, I said, bro, I don't mean disrespect, but if that's rough to you, I would get a ref now.
Yeah.
Because I don't even think, I'm not even moving my men. And he goes, yeah, but it's the noise.
Oh my God.
The noise. Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah, were you in the service or something? Do you have a problem? I don't know. I mean,
is that where you reached across and slapped him? I would hope.
No, I mean, but you know, it's funny. These guys will show up. I mean, and it's just like, you know,
yeah.
You know, and Tom York, these guys, they're all. I say I love Tom. He's my favorite guy, but he's a fraud. In Florida, he's jarring. He's doing everything in the world. And he comes out on Florida. He comes out on tour. And he's Mary Poppins. You know, I mean,
Tom is Mary Poppins.
I mean, you know,
now we're getting interesting.
Him now.
I'm sending him a text right now that says Mike Green just called you Mary Poppins. I'm doing it right now. I'm not kidding.
Poppins.
Tom York.
I watched him and Dakota Diaz play and Bob's kid, and man, that table, there ain't a leg on the floor when he's over there. In the next match, he's referencing, telling people they can't move their men. I don't know. Interesting to me, but you know.
What we need is Tom York reffing himself, right?
Yeah.
We need two Tom Yorks. You know, we're winding things down on what really has been a really enjoyable couple of hours spending time with the great Mike Green. Mike, you know, the 80s were your decade. You know, one of the things I love to ask of players who were successful back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or whatever, is the feeling you have now about that time of your life. I mean, and most of the time the answer is, it was the greatest time of my life, or one of the most special times of my life. When you look back on the 1980s, the success you had, the people you met, the tournaments you played at, just the scene in general, what are your feelings about it at this stage of your life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's the best moments of my life. I mean, you know, guys like our age don't like to admit things, but I mean, when I won, I called my mom, started crying. You call mom, right?
Yeah.
Mom, I won the world, you know, and you know, and honestly, for me, I probably couldn't honestly tell you 10 matches that I played in. but I could tell you 1,000 stories of fun times and people I met and still are friends with. And, just traveling, go to Chicago. Guys are like, come to my house, hang out. They come to Florida. We had an open, obviously we had 30, 40 people there sometime. And no, it was just such a great time, great friendships. And, and it's just something that I don't regret anything I ever did. And I did a lot of things I shouldn't have, but, I definitely, I think that's where I just see a lot of people missing out today. I'm sure there's a lot of good friends out there, but I mean, we honestly were like brothers, I mean, it was just, we were this clan of foosball players, and that's what we knew. And, I quit playing baseball and football. I was pretty, they were coming after me for football, and I told them, nah, I'm playing foosball. The guy's like, yeah, that's a money winner.
but you always played foosball kind of like a middle linebacker anyway, didn't you?
Well, that's what Randy Stark said. Me and Starr went to play Randy Stark and his partner one day, and he goes, man, now they let the Belchers in.
Oh, God.
But yeah, I mean, just a lot of great times and friendships, and to be honest with you, I mean, the winning the Worlds was incredible, but there were other things, and there's more or less just a lot of I mean, we left one time in a Winnebago with our buddy Jim. There was about 10 of us, and we took off for almost 3 months.
Wow,
just traveled from tournament to tournament, locals, and went to parks or whatever. We were just hanging out somewhere, walking a place. Some guy says, "You guys play foosball for money," and it got us to the next town.
That's cool.
It's awesome.
There's
I love
romance to that.
But absolutely best times of my life. Well, obviously, the best times now are the fact that I'm with my wife and my daughter. She just graduated college, and
congratulations, man.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I gave my life to the Lord. I know that's a weird subject for some people, which I find funny. They were all right with the Mike Green that used to be, but now the guy that's kind of straightened his life up, they go, "Hey, did you hear about Mike?"
Yeah.
Just ignore
that.
But
anyway, I mean, no, things are really good for me. Couldn't be happier. And, it's kind of funny because you asked me that question earlier, and I'm always really just wanting to come back. I mean, if I was going to come back, I honestly would pay Tony Spreedeman to beat on me for 6 hours a day. Because that's the only way I would ever do it. Because, somebody asked me here and they said, can't you just play for fun? And I said, no, I can't. I can, but I can't.
No,
that doesn't change.
That's a lie.
I'm the same way. I play my wife here at home, and I tell her, we got to bet something here. You're not going to get the best out of me. I've got to play for something here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I play against my imaginary friends, and that's a horrible moment.
Actually,
Dylan
Marco asked me that question. I played him in the tournament the first time he ever played me, and I scored about 9 shots from the back on him. And he walks up to me after the match. He goes, "Wow!" And I said, "Yeah, I noticed one thing about you. I just couldn't quite get it on you." And he goes, "Mike, you haven't played in 20 years. You hit 9 points on me, and you think you could have done better?" Like, well, honestly, yes.
Okay, Mike.
And that's really what makes a world champion is you're really never satisfied, right? You're always tweaking, always adjusting, always making incremental changes to your game or maybe even beyond that, because so many of us who have been involved with foosball learned a lot about being successful, about excellence from playing foosball in other areas of our lives. And I'm assuming that happened to you as well. And it's great to hear. You sound great, Mike. Life sounds like it's good. It's fun to kind of reminisce about the good old days. And sounds like you're in a pretty good place and you've got it all in good perspective. And you somehow survived the Johnny Horton era. And it's been really a pleasure talking with you here tonight.
Well, thanks, Jim. But I just have one more thing to say. There's a few guys out there that are top players that I have so much respect for. And I just wish they treat me pretty bad because I have that Johnny Horton stigma thing going on with them, and I know it sounds silly and it's like a whine because it really doesn't bother me. I just find it funny that none of them have ever gotten, they, took the time to even have a conversation with me to see who I really am. So anyway, that's one of the things I talk about. That's why a lot of guys don't want to come back, and a lot of things it's just not worth it anymore, So I don't want to end it on a downer because I've had a great time, and I really appreciate you guys offering this to me, and I'd do it anytime. It's a blast.
So Mike, I'm just first of all, thank you for taking the time. You're a class act. There's no question about that. We greatly appreciate you taking some time to talk to us on FoosTalk Live. Keep me in mind because I'd love to hear about the screenplay you're going to write about foosball. And
What's that?
I said I want you to keep me in mind. I'd like to hear more about when you write this screenplay about foosball.
Well, my wife says I can write the screenplay now because the statute of limitations have run out.
That's awesome. And who is going to play Johnny Horton? That's what I want to know. What actor is going to play Johnny Horton?
Man, are you kidding? That's easy.
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp?
No. The dude from, what was that guy's name from 2.5 Men?
Oh,
Danny
yes.
DeVito?
No, Charlie Sheen. Absolutely.
There you go.
Charlie Sheen.
There you go. Perfect.
Danny DeVito would be me.
That's awesome, man.
That's fantastic.
That is great. Arnold Schwarzenegger would have to play me, by the way. Have to.
Yeah,
Same build.
Yeah.
Same build.
He's got a better command of the language, Mark. Sorry.
I have a picture of Mark Torres winning the Worlds in '94. It's on my wall.
Wow.
No.
Well, I forgot I won that tournament.
No, I did tell Mark. I know you guys got to go big quick. I did tell Mark that one of my biggest regrets ever was I had a chance to play with Fernando. First came on the scene, and I knew the guy was. I already clocked his speed. I knew the guy was a champion. And I'd already promised somebody, and that's just not my DNA. I don't dump people, but if I was going to dump anybody, it would have been him. I think he wound up getting third with a guy that didn't play too well.
Everett Jolly. Everett Jolly. I remember that. It was Everett Jolly. It was too
I
bad
don't
you
want to
guys
say a
didn't
name,
play.
but thanks.
Yeah. You're welcome.
That's what I meant by doubles teams. I mean, what if we would have teamed up?
Yeah, you would have won that tournament.
Yeah.
Because people don't realize I played great on Tornado. I mean, heck, I won a North Carolina tournament. I blocked the crap on the people. The problem was that Todd told everybody that forwards all had to play with forwards. So, I made a joke that after Todd told everybody that, I went from having the pick of my partners so I couldn't get the bus boy to play with me. So,
Mike,
great show, man. Great
let's do
show,
this
you
again.
guys.
Yeah,
Thank
let's
you
do this
so
again,
much.
Mike.
Yes,
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Mike.
And have a great holiday season. All right.
All right, brother. You
Cheers.
guys have a great Christmas. Thank you.
All right. Take
Cheers.
care.
Hey, Mike. Take care, bud.
All right, guys. What a great show, and we're right up to the wire. So let's do this again Sunday. What do you say?
That was fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing show. One of my favorites, man. Awesome show.
And thank you for listening in to FoosTalk Live. FoosTalk Live is a product of Foosball Radio and Inside Foos TV. All rights reserved. Our sincere thanks to 518 Prince, Foosball Clubs USA, Foosballers The Movie, Foos by Tony and Foos by Brandon, and the United States Table Soccer Organization. Join us next Sunday for another episode of FoosTalk Live. In the meantime,
we'll see you foozin'.